Good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah Janyre. I'm the managing editor with Kriegel Publications, and it's so good to be here tonight. I have the honor of introducing Janyre Tromp, the author for the evening. First, I want to give a huge thank you to Bakerland House for hosting this. When we first got here, they added a lot because wow, what a great turnout. I am just so happy to see you all. I also see some faces from Kriegel Publications here tonight. Will you guys like give a little up down with your hand if you're from Kriegel? Yeah, I see them too. The book is a team project, and that is it's a great team to work with. So thankfully you guys are out here tonight. A little bit about Janyre. Janyre is a developmental editor for Kriegel Publications. She's also a writer, obviously. So I have a trivia question for you. You have to think hard about this one. How many books do you think Janyre has in print available for sale or even for free that you can get anywhere? You can use one hand, two hands, however many you need. I see a 3, I see a 1, I see a 6. That's a 3s. A 10, 100. My daughter, she really hopes for lots of things. So, yeah, so Janyre actually, this is her first adult novel, novel for adults. We'll say it that way. Novel. There we go. That went a little sideways for a second. So, and that is Shadows in the Mind's Eye. Oh, have any of you touched this cover? Is it not the most? I love it. Love it. Love it. All right, so we've got that one. She has 2 children's board books out that are beautiful. She has a coloring book that she illustrated. She has a free short story that's available on her website that you could go there and sign up for and get that. She has a novella that she has a story included in, and another novella coming out in November. September. I was off. September. So what's that number? 7?
Well, it's
all together.
You don't count the one that's
We're not,
not
okay,
out.
so we're gonna say 6. Yeah, 6. So and we are here tonight to celebrate Shadows in the Mind's Eye with her. A little bit more about Janyre in her spare time, if she has spare time besides writing books. She is a soccer mom, a track mom, a musician, an artist, and she loves the outdoors. Janyre and her husband Chris live in the greater Grand Rapids area with their 2 teenagers, and a menagerie of pets. Flip the page. All right, there's one question everyone is kind of asking here. I know it's a burning question. The elephant in the room question, I'm going to answer it. The question is, how do you really say her name? Right? We've all read it and we all make a stab at it. I've known her for more than 20 years and I still make a stab at it. And she answers me every time. So it is pronounced many ways because even her parents both say it differently from each other. So her mom says Jan ear, like your ear, and her dad says Jen air, like the air. And so anything even close to that, she answers to, and it's not upsetting to her in any way. So if you want to talk to Janyre, don't know how I say it, if you want to talk to her and call her by name, take your best guess and she will answer you, and she's cool with it. She's all good. So just so you know. Well, I am so excited for you. This is amazing. This has been a hard-won journey for you, and I'm just excited and proud for you. So, all right, everybody, welcome to their class.
This is really intimidating, you guys. So like an hour and a half ago, I was at my daughter's track meet, running the pole vault area, and it's, if you're not here in Michigan, it's very windy here for everybody online. So my hair was about this big, and I was like, oh man. But I am so glad to be here. You guys, I'm seeing people I haven't seen in years. It's so much fun. Thank you so much for coming out. Like I mentioned, I'm coming from the track meet. My son is at a soccer thing. So I know you guys are really, really busy, so I do appreciate you coming and sacrificing your time to come. We're gonna do a couple of little icebreakers because wherever Sarah went. Sarah didn't tell you a few things. So Sarah and I have been friends for lots of years. And we talk an awful lot. And the funny thing is that this book would not be here without her family. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But Sarah's a very precious person to me, and I'm so grateful for her and the team at Google. But first, we're going to start with some giveaways. So I'm going to try and figure out who came the farthest. So who came the farthest? Who came really far? Raise your hand. Oh, I think Janyre probably did. Anybody come farther than Ohio? So Janyre Roche, for everybody here, she is an author as well. This Wandering Heart is beautiful. It's a contemporary story. She does romance, but it's got that like really meaty depth to it. I love her books. And so Janyre, you get, and I have a bunch of different sizes. This is a shirt that has a quote from the book, and it says, "Light breaks through the broken places." And it's a quote from one of my favorite characters in the world. Her name is Debbie May. And so I have a couple of different sizes, so you can pick one. And a color candle for you, and you love candles. So I don't even know if Baker has your book here, but they used to, because I've seen it. So if they don't have it here, you guys can order it. So Janyre Roche, she's amazing. Okay, so like most places, food is like a major point of gathering in the South, okay? So we're gonna take a second and find out some things about y'all, okay? So we're gonna get our legs working a little bit, and I can say all y'all, and that's I can get my southern on, and there's a reason behind that, but I'll tell you here in a minute too. We're gonna stand up if you have not had collard greens. Has anybody here not had collard greens? All right, stand up if you've not had them. All right. So sit down if you've had grits. These are all the southern foods, y'all. All right. So sit down if you've had homemade chicken and dumplings. We had homemade chicken and dumplings. I'm down to it. All right, so this is not necessarily Southern, but this is post-World War II. Have either of you had chicory coffee? I know, it's nasty. It tastes like you're licking an ashtray, trust me. It's nasty. Cafe du Monde in New Orleans. If y'all want to try chicory coffee, you can go to Meyer. For those of you who are in the Midwest, you can go to Meyer and you can get Cafe du Monde chicory coffee and taste the ashtray for yourself. So you guys, did you come together?
Yeah.
Okay, so y'all can go home and split your collard greens. This is, I'm told by Miss Hughes that these collard greens are the best collard greens you can get, and they taste really similar to what you would make from home. And I'm going to give you guys a t-shirt, and you guys can each get a t-shirt, okay? Okay? Because I have a bunch of them. All right, because everybody loves me some collard greens. Actually, they're really good. Okay, so our final one. Stand up if this is your first time at Baker Book House. This is anybody's first time at Baker Book House. All right, fantastic. Okay, so have either of you, all three of you, have any of you guys been to an independent bookstore before? So like Schuler Books. All right, so sit. Have you been to Schuler? Have you been to Schuler? Oh, you guys, you're not helping me at all. Okay, so I know those two really well. So I'm going to get you a Baker Book House gift card. Okay, so don't let me forget because I got to buy it first, and then you can use it tonight. So you can use it online. You're amazing online. They've got a lot of their stuff before their pre-orders. They have a lot of free shipping on their pre-orders. They do really good things. So okay, so that concludes our giveaways. But you guys, I'm going to make sure that everybody goes home with something. So if you haven't already, all of the books that went up for Baker Bookstores should have gotten little postcards. I actually painted these pictures for everybody, and I wanted everybody to kind of have a little thank you gift for my books, you guys. And there's little quotes on the back, and you can actually use them as postcards, or you can give them away to people, but I will have one for everybody here, a set of them for everybody here tonight. And Sarah mentioned the book Wide Open, and I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to get that book too later. So, without further ado. So, Shadows in the Mind's Eye, there's kind of a long tail on this book, as most books have. The interesting thing about me is I'm a historical novelist who used to hate history. True confession. History as told by a lot of school classes is dry as dirt. It's timelines and memorizing people that you don't care about, all right? And then in college, I went to Taylor University. Shout out to Taylor. I got a Taylor right over here too. Where's Amy? There she is, another Taylor, right? So Dr. Tom Jones is a professor at Taylor, and he was a U.S. history professor. And one of our very first assignments was we had to go talk to a friend or a family member about the Depression or World War II. So just a little bit away from where I went to school, my grandparents lived, and my grandparents were two of my favorite people in the whole wide world. Grandma Baba, we call them Baba, Grandpa is Baba. Lived in this teeny tiny little town in Indiana, and that's where I get my right to say y'all, because they had a little bit of an accent down there. They sounded a little bit Alabamian. My grandma, Suze, do you remember? My sister's here. Grandma would go, I'm gonna go put the wash out on the line. It was wash, not wash. Anyways, I sat on their front porch, and my grandma made the best lemonade. I will fight you all for that. She made the best lemonade, okay? So we sat on the porch with a glass of lemonade. My grandparents told me stories I had never heard before. My grandfather was a liaison pilot in World War II. 7 out of 10 of them did not come home. 7 out of 10 did not come home. My grandfather was shot down over enemy lines. A liaison pilot, they go up in these unarmed Piper Cubs, like really stripped down, like flap your wings kind of things. And literally the only guns that were on those things were the guns that the spotter carried with them. And they directed fire for the artillery. So they were associated with Army. And the other Army, the German Army, would just pick them off coming up over the horizon. That's how much they perished. My grandfather came home and he told crazy stories about all of the things that he did. My grandma told me stories about the Depression. And y'all, I was hooked because they're stories. And there's something about stories that transcends, that you end up learning things through history and story that you would have never picked up anywhere else, you know? And I'm kind of a nerd, if you don't know me very well, I'm a total nerd. And I love neuroscience. And so one of the weird things about stories, when somebody tells you a story about something, your brain lights up in different ways than if you're just told facts. If you're told facts, it like lights up this factual side of your brain. But if you're told a story, it not only lights up that factual side, all of a sudden you're sparking over here with an experience. It's like you just experienced it. And so story is one of those ways that you can tell things in a way that impacts you far more than just reading dry history and timelines, right? So I'm stuck on history. Fast forward, I'm talking to my grandparents now pretty regularly, just writing down their stories. Emma's laughing at me because that's not fast forward. Sorry, I'm gonna pick on y'all night. Emma is Sarah's daughter, by the way, so we've known each other for a long time too. Since she was born, actually. Anyway, and so I got to the point where I started writing stories. I wasn't somebody who grew up dreaming of writing stories. One day, our old managing editor said, Janyre, you should try writing a story. And so I did. And that was my first, it was a juvenile fiction. It's out of print, don't go read it, it's not, okay? It was from 20 years ago, so it's a totally different era. Anyway, and so I started writing, And I came to this realization that my grandparents and the stories that they told, inside their stories was the fact that my grandfather came back from the war a changed man. And they didn't say a whole lot about it, and they didn't make a big deal about it, but I kind of started doing some research about PTSD, which is what we call it now. Back then it was battle fatigue, right? Like if you took a really good nap, you might get better, right? Blow it off because it's just battle fatigue. And once I started doing some research, I realized that there was a high percentage of the guys who were on the front lines that came back with PTSD, and that just led me to wonder, how did they do it? My grandparents were amazing people. My grandfather was an amazing man, and their marriage was an enviably strong marriage. And so how the heck did they do it? And y'all, that was the start of Shadows in the Mind's Eye. Because this book is a suspense story. It is Hitchcockian, it is twisty. Somebody just described it the other day as lyrical suspense, which probably is a pretty darn good description of my style. But it's ultimately about love and making it through really hard times, you know, and it isn't easy. And the interesting thing about this book is I started this book about 5 years ago. And then my husband's here too. Our daughter got real sick. She almost died. She's okay now. Don't worry. She's an athlete. She's amazing and she's strong. You would look at her and you would never know there was anything wrong with her. But I'll tell you what, having a kid that almost dies a couple of times, that'll change you. That'll change you. And I ended up with PTSD, and so did she. And I suddenly had a whole new respect for the guys coming back from the battlefield who had scars that you couldn't see. Trouble. You wouldn't know unless you took a second to figure it out, right? And so I had this wonderful opportunity to explore PTSD in a whole new way. And because of the things that I went through, I wanted Sam and Annie are my two main characters, and they're fantastic. I love them to pieces. And Sam and Annie were born in a time where there weren't meds and there weren't modern techniques for psychological help. But the interesting thing is that some of the best ways to treat battlefield PTSD, which is very specific, y'all. So I have PTSD, but it's related to medical trauma. And so even though it looks the same, the treatments are a little different, okay? I did a ton of research and talked to a bunch of therapists who work with guys with battlefield PTSD. And one of the most effective ways right now to help treat them is EMDR, okay? So I'm gonna throw out some really good news for you, okay, ready? Bilateral stimulation, okay? Bilateral stimulation, so bi is two, so it's two sides of your body, and stimulation is you're alternating and stimulating both sides of your body. But I'm gonna do a little walkabout. So what is bilateral stimulation other than walking? I'm alternating sides of my body. And for those of you that know anything about anxiety or depression, doctors often recommend walking. It's a form of EMDR. It's in fact partly how it was discovered. And so I did things like I gave Sam walking, somebody who would take him for walks, who would talk to him. I gave someone who talked to him about deep breathing, which has shown massive help for anxiety attacks. So it was an interesting discovery, interesting and difficult to work in themes of hope in this book because it's such a dark world, am I right? So the fun thing about this book is that they do find hope at the end of it. And that's something that's really important to me because I think that, as Janyre said, which I guess is me saying it, light breaks through the broken places. And I really do believe that. I believe that when we're broken, that gives us a chance and an opportunity to show light in a way that we can't in any other way. All right. So one of the other things that's interesting about this book that I mentioned just a minute ago, a little while ago, I mentioned Sarah's family. So yes, this book is kind of loosely based on my grandparents. It started with a question about my grandparents, but I didn't want people to think it was biographical, right? Because Sam Sam is like, you wonder if this dude has just jumped off the deep end. And I didn't want anybody thinking that that was my grandfather. So I was talking to Sarah and she's like, well, you know, my family's from a small town. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, they're from a small town in Arkansas. And, you know, I'm like, okay. And she's like, and we got this book. And I'm like, you got a book? She's like, yeah, I got a book about all of my family history. And you guys, they have a book of family history. And I'm a historian now, so I'm like, what? I have like access to stories that nobody else has. So I'm reading through this book and I discover Hot Springs, Arkansas. And Hot Springs, Arkansas, which if you don't know, that's where Shadows in the Mind's Eye is located. Hot Springs, Arkansas, during the time period of when the book takes place, is the largest illegal gambling site in the nation. There's mob activity. We have, Al Capone has an entire floor of one of the main hotels down there named after him. All right, there's a plaque, Al Capone's floor. But then what's really cool is that Babe Ruth was down there. All of the major athletes were down in that area too, because there's hot springs, and during that time they had curates and they thought they helped, you know, cure diseases, which they helped a little. But so what better place to drop a suspense than this place where there's all this activity? Am I right? So we've got a guy that's a little bit like, we're not sure if he's going to jump over the edge or not. And we've got all of this mob activity, which makes it highly likely that there actually is stuff going on in the Arkansas hills. And we've got poor Andy, who all she wants is her husband to come back home and life to go back to normal and for her little girl to be safe, right? Isn't that what we all want? And so I love these characters because they have so many relatable things that Sam wants his family to be safe. He wants to be able to go through his life and be normal and look like everybody else. And that just might not be in the cards for him. And that's kind of the question of the book. So I want to read a little bit of Shadows in the Mind's Eye for you guys. And I'll tell you what, I struggled with trying to figure out, I was telling these ladies earlier, I had such a hard time figuring out what excerpt to read for you guys because I can't read late in the book because there's too many twists and turns. And I don't want to give anything away by accident. And so I am going to read to you when Sam is coming home. He comes home and he finds his family gone. And Annie is, and so he's up, well, I'm not gonna tell you because, you know, we're not sure where he is. Annie comes home and she's putting away the horse because y'all, during that time period, they didn't even have electricity up in Arkansas. So they had horse-drawn buggies and they plowed with the horses, and it was crazy. All of the research that went into that. And so I'm going to read to you as Annie is the way. She's putting away the horse. I need to drink the water first. Okay, so, and I won't be able to do her accent either. So, a scramble in the haymow set bits of straw raining down on me. The movement was too large to be any of the barn cats, and my fingers tightened around the leather reins. My rapid heartbeat loud in the silence. The sound of a footsteps on the plank above shattered my frozen stance, and I spun back toward the doors, my mind bouncing between escaping or protecting my girl. My foot caught on a rough spot, and I stumbled, falling in the scrambling heat. Everything was silent. Even Elsie stood still as death in her stall. Shivers crept down my spine. The devil himself had come out of the mountain, casting a cloud over everything. Peter had warned me that he'd caught a few drifters up on the farm. Elsie kicked against the wall and a scream clogged in my throat as I stumbled into the nearby grain store, searching desperately for a weapon. The cow lowed at me, rolling her big brown eyes like she wondered who let the crazy woman into the barn. The metal grain scoop wasn't going to do much, but I held it in front of me nonetheless. At least it might protect me until I crossed the barn to get my shotgun out of the wagon. Who's up there? My voice was run over by fear. Wasn't even sure the cow could hear me. I'd read about the blood-crazed men coming home from the war. We'd asked them to be killers over there, and some were having trouble giving it up. But as the calm, chirping cricket chorus started back up, the stories of those men, not quite right, doing terrible twisted things, began to evaporate. I near convinced myself I dreamed it all when a man-shaped figure peered over the ledge. I recovered my voice, the scream ripping through the air as I dropped the grade spoon, ran for the gun, and stood in the shadows between the intruder and my sleeping daughter. Best stay where you are. I got a gun. My shaking hands belied the confidence in my voice. The man's answer was muffled by his stumbling descent. Though I followed his movements with the barrel of the gun, I wouldn't shoot him, even if I thought to load the darn thing. Last thing I wanted was the law sniffing around the farm because I killed some thrifter. Sure as the sun rises in the east, they'd find something, and then Daddy would swoop in and smother me with his saving. We don't have much food to share. My voice sounded like an unsteady girl's, cracking in the middle, but the footsteps stopped. We'll feed you, and then you best be on your way. I shifted my sweaty grip on the shotgun. I could do whatever was necessary. Think of Rosie. Come on out, my command echoed into the rafters. The man stepped forward, the Negro light behind him casting strange shadows across his body. His tattered uniform hung on him, a row of medals glinted from his chest that had no doubt once been broad and strong. Oh, poor man. The tip of the gun dipped. I heard a match strike and fizz, watched it sacrifice its light to the lantern by Elsie's stall. The chest of the man leapt into color, and he brushed a splotch of mud across his navy trousers. A gold wedding band caught the light, and I was so memorized by the meaning that I nearly missed him speaking. Annie? He stepped toward me, squinting into the flickering light. Annie? That voice. The shotgun clattered to the ground, a gasp for air, my fingers fluttering to my lips, praying I wasn't dreaming. But then his arms were around me, his breath caught against my hair, my neck, desperate, lost, his body skinnier than I ever thought possible, yet real, wrapped around mine. Please, God, real. His stubbly beard pricked my fingertips while his fingers explored my face, his calluses scratching against my skin, anchoring. He pressed my head into his chest and his heart pounded against my head, beating in rhythm with my own. The dovetail fit of our bodies, nearly forgotten, but precious and right. My Sam is home. So I'm going to take questions if you guys have questions. Sarah's going to use the mic. I do need y'all to talk into the mic because we are live streaming so that people on the internet can hear you guys, okay? So if you have a question, just raise your hand. Becky, are you looking to see if there's questions on this?
Janyre, you need to speak a little louder too.
Okay. Any questions? All right.
What's your favorite story from Papa and Grandma?
Oh, that's my sister asking. My favorite story from Papa and Grandma. Oh, good heavens. I'm gonna go with my favorite picture. So I have a set of 3 pictures. The first one is my sister Suzanne and my older brother Sean being led by my grandfather, and they've got fishing gear over their shoulder, and it's the 2 of them running after him. And then the next picture, if they're set like 3 down. So first one's my sister, my big brother and sister, my grandpa. And then the next one down, and it's them a little further out, and then little me with my curls. I had curls then, and then I didn't have curls, and now I have curls again. True story. I think I was in diapers, so I mean like 3, you know, running after him. I had bright red shorts on and this hideous thing that was a life preserver. Me running after him, and then the last picture is all 3 of us in Papa's aluminum boat with a little trawler motor and going out to go fishing with my grandpa. My grandfather was somebody who he had time for everybody, you know, when we were down there. I practically grew up going down all summer long down and visiting them. They lived on this there was 2 lakes, and they lived on the channel between the 2 lakes. We'd get a little wet. We'd be pruny all summer long. That and basket butt. That was the other day, basket butt. So we had these stools that were woven stools, and of course we were in our bathing suits the whole time. And we played games, and we'd sit on those woven stools and you get up, oh my gosh, it hurts. Your butt would stick to the chair, the stools, and you'd step up and, you know, like you've been sitting somewhere too long and like everything was like, it just hurt like crazy. But we did, we never learned. We never learned, but so. Anybody else? Oh, she's gonna take a hike on this one. She's going back over in the corner.
Engineer.
Okay.
I wondered, what is your practice as a writer, and has that progressed or changed over the years?
Yes, it's changed. It's changed a lot. So actually it has had to change again recently, because just doing the promotion for a book takes on a whole nother level of necessary things that you have to do as an author. So I have less and less and less time to actually write. So you have to become really, really, really proficient at it. And so one of the things that I have learned to do is basically word sprinting. And so you sit down and you give yourself like 15 minutes and you just try and write as fast as you can. And then you don't worry about what you're writing. You just write like the wind, and then you go back and edit later. Which can be kind of messy in the long run, but it's sometimes when you're stuck or whatever, that just helps you kind of break through because you just kind of go. And sometimes I'll use a prompt when I do that. If I'm dealing with writer's block, and sometimes it just helps me get through. But I always start with reading something. I either read poetry or narrative nonfiction before I write. And I have my roots in poetry, which I think is where the lyrical side of my writing comes in, because poetry is so sparse and so particular in each word has meaning. And so just being very careful to make every single word count, and that just reading the poetry beforehand gives me that rhythm and feel for language again. Yeah, and I just don't have much time to write anymore. So it's very like, okay, we're gonna go. I think we answered her questions.
Hi, Janyre. In your book, you talk a lot about then it wasn't called PTSD. And you talked about you having some of that. As you were writing this book, did that help you understand or heal from or come through your own PTSD?
So the research for it helped. When I write, I put myself in the character's point of view. Which when you're dealing with PTSD, when you have PTSD, felt very dangerous to me. Because I was afraid I wouldn't be able to pull out. And then I get stuck. I didn't. I didn't. But I had to be very careful about that. But I read probably 5 or 6 books just on treatment of PTSD and dealing with anxiety disorders and that type of a thing. And I learned a ton. I mean, I learned massive amounts. For anybody out there that does struggle with PTSD or anxiety disorders, first of all, I need to say, go get help if you need it. But Andy Colbert's book, Try Softer, is one of the best books I have ever read about dealing with anxiety and depression. It is very science-based, but she also gives you tools, like usable tools in every single chapter. The whole book, I wish I brought it, has like sticky notes sticking out of every possible way, just as tools to practice and to use. And the more you use those tools, the more you practice the tools, the more usable they become.
Since your day job involves editing, how does that affect you when you go to write? Because you've got all these other ideas and things that have been, right under you, just that, you have to try to just knock that out, or, because their ideas obviously are in your head too. How does that work?
How does it work for me? So my agent, Rachel McMillan, who is amazing, she's actually a writer too, and she's an amazing writer. But she calls me a unicorn because it is a very rare thing for a true editor to also be a true writer, because it is really hard. It is really, really hard. So my hardest thing, I think, is turning off the editor. And part of what I do too is I assess the market too. So I'm also always going, okay, if I do this, then the market will like it. But if I do this, then it's being more true to the story, but I want to be able to sell it, but I want it to be good for the story, but I want to be able to sell it. And so is that, I have that going on. But I also have a very strange process as a writer because of my editing background. So most people will write an entire book and then go back to edit it. I actually write to about the halfway mark, maybe the 2/3 mark. And then I pretty much know what's wrong with the book. And I start over and I edit it from that point and then push through to the end. So I have a little bit of a weird process, but it works for me because of being a developmental editor. So I have built into me, I know what my problems are because I'm constantly every day assessing structural issues in a book. So it works for me, but it doesn't work for everybody.
This is a bit of a side thing.
Oh, no, go.
You talked about having all kinds of critters.
Yes.
I want to know about your critters.
Oh, my critters. So actually one of them is kind of shows up in the book in the form of Babe. So there's a kitty cat in here who's a white kitty cat who's a little bit troublesome. And he is my Brave. That's my cat's name. So we have Brave and Hope are two Balinese cats, and the story behind their names, we got them as a way to help my daughter get through some of her medical treatments. And she'd always wanted a kitty cat. And they're a bit of a miracle because they're hard to get, the Balinese cats, but they're hypoallergenic. And my kids have allergies, so we had to have a hypoallergenic cat. Usually there's a 2-year waiting period, and we literally picked them up on the way home from the hospital. So I mean, it was a total miracle. So those are our 2 kitties. And then we have a dog named Odie, and Odie is a rescued Shetland sheepdog. He's a little eccentric, he's old, and he is starting to lose his sight. And he barks at shadows because he can't tell, are you a person? Oh, well, no. And then we have saltwater fish. And we have a goldfish sitting out on our deck. Actually, he's got a little welder, so he doesn't freeze into a goldfish over the winter. And it works very well. So we love all animals, except for spiders and ants. I talk to my mom about how I react when I see an ant. Don't anymore, but I used to. A banshee. I don't know. Do we have to be careful of time?
You got time.
Okay.
Don't worry, I'll mute you if you get too long.
Okay. Good.
So you spoke a little bit about Sam's journey. Can you tell us about Annie's journey? A lot of people who will be reading your book will be the partner of someone who's going through a hard time. So can you tell us a little bit more about her journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So Annie is one of the strongest people I know and doesn't know it. So I'm trying to be really careful because I don't want to give away anything. So her dad was a heavy for the mom, basically. And the weird thing about hot springs, you're like, oh my gosh, that's like, was he in trouble for a while at the time? No, it was totally acceptable in Hot Springs, Arkansas, to be part of the mom. It was the most bizarre time period in the world. If you want to read about it, there's a nonfiction book called, The Bookkeeper's Dog. And it's about a bookie, and it's written from the daughter's perspective, and she didn't realize that he didn't make literal books. Until she realized. Because it was just that normal. But then as Annie started to figure things out, it got darker and darker for her, and Sam was kind of her refuge. And so when he comes back, starting to mirror some of the things that her dad did, she goes into full-on panic. But one of the things that I'm so proud of Amy for is that she stood up and said, nope. Nope. We don't do this. We don't take abuse. And I realize that you're a good man and all the background and all that stuff, but nope, we don't do abuse. And Sam, to his credit, by the way, was like, yeah, I don't either. I'm gonna go sleep out in the barn so I don't accidentally do anything. But Annie is somebody who, man, she questions and she searches and she wants the best for the people around her, and she doesn't quite know how to get there. And one of the people that I put in the book on purpose is Debbie May, and Debbie was actually kind of influenced by an ancestor of the Hughes family, and her name was Debbie. That's where I got the name from. She's this amazing woman, and very, very loosely based on her, but just more her personality is put into Debbie May, and just this faithful person who says amazing things like, it's gonna be okay, because the light's gonna get through that broken place that you got, and it's gonna be okay, you just kind of have to leave. And none of us, most of all me, is good at waiting, right? So I think that is one of the biggest things for Amy, is that she learns that persistence of waiting, but also there's that line there, because that was really important to me, to never dismiss the reality of what happens with PTSD too, and the importance of keeping families safe too. We're making it work, Sam.
This is good. Walk off my dinner.
Janyre, you talked about your writing process, quite a bit, very smart and creative. What are your quirky writing habits?
My quirky writing habits. I haven't seen you in ages, John. I see you. I didn't recognize you until you started talking. My word, blast from the past. Mom's is Beefus. Stuff from Beefus. Over here. Sorry, make sure they see each other. Oh my word. Quirky. I am all quirky. So here's something that I picked up that's kind of in the poetry background. One of the books that I always recommend to people who are stuck in their writing is a book called Poem Crazy. And this book, it is just basically like how to write poetry, and it's amazing. And one of the things that she recommends doing is writing out random words. So you do random nouns, you do random adjectives, you do random verbs, and you stick them into glass jars, and then you pull them out and you put it together and see what you get. Okay, which is really weird, but it is amazing what comes out. And so I create those jars for each of my books that have unique words that each of the characters would use. So like Sam is a farmer, and he also drove Higgins boats in World War II, which are the amphibious boats. So he has all this terminology that he would use because he's a farmer and because he was a coxswain for the Higgins boats. So I have all kinds of verbs in there and adjectives that talk about, plowing or, and I can't think of any off the top of my head now because I'm 2 books down now, 3 books down from Shadows in the Mind's Eye, because that's the way it works. But so I use those words, and that helps with that lyrical rhythms and word choices and verbiage. And so that is something that I do a lot. I do weird things like, I always start with really, really deep character studies. And so I'll do things like describe my characters by shape or by color or by weather. Whatever seems to fit their personality. So I've had characters that were like, I used to be circle. I used to be able to roll with flow, and all of a sudden I've got edges and I can't go anywhere. So see what I'm saying? And you immediately know where they feel it, you feel that, because it's just a unique way of looking at things. Or you talk about color, and they're green, spring green, and they're fresh, and they're new, you know? And so it's just a fun way to find words that are unique to a book. And then I put them in a little Ziploc bag and I stick them in the journal when I'm done with the book, and then I move on to the next book and I create a whole new list and I cut them out. It's like craft time. It's fabulous.
Janyre, I know that you've been a pro in Christian publishing for a long time. You've had experience in both the marketing and the editorial side. I'm curious how your experience in Christian book publishing has informed your experience as an author. Like how have you lived out that role differently because of what you know from your time in the industry?
Well, first of all, I want to say that because of my role, I've had a little bit more access to authors, like more experienced authors than a normal debut author. And I have to say, for anybody out there that's watching, this industry, the authors, they're so amazing. Thank you so much for everybody out there that has supported me. You guys, if you're an author out there, these people, reach out to them. They're so helpful. They've been amazing. But I kind of touched on it a second ago. I get in my head a lot. As everybody who's ever talked to me brainstormed with me knows this one a lot. And Janine, we're on Marco Polo, and I'm like, I have a couple of friends on Marco Polo. It's an app that is basically like Messenger, but you see videos. It's amazing. And we brainstorm on that. And I get in my head because I know the trends and I'm aware of them, and it makes me panic a little because I know the things that I'm supposed to be doing, and I know the amount of time that I have, and I get ahead of myself. And so I'm constantly like, no, you need to be where you are right now. You need to be where you are right now. You need to do what you need to do today and not worry about what's 10 steps down the road this way or what you forgot yesterday. And I say that like it's, super easy. It's so not easy. But it's an amazing industry. I love the publishing world. Gosh, I think it's been 25 years. That makes me feel really old, y'all. But it's an amazing industry and I love it to pieces. And it's just a good place to be for good people.
Do you make yourself right every day?
Do I make myself right every day? Oh, heavens, no. No, I'm far too busy for that pressure. I gave that one up a long time ago. I'm a very strong believer in do what works for you. So there are rules out there. And if they work for you, fantastic. Follow the rules. If they don't work for you, fantastic. Don't follow them. You have everybody from Stephen King, who is like, just write it all out and, like, bam, get it done. And then you've got the people that are like, no, you need to thought every single step before you write it. And then you have everybody else in between, do what works for you. And isn't that life though? Do what you need to do what you're supposed to do today, and don't worry about the rest. But yes, I write pretty regularly stuff, but I don't write. Especially right now when I'm marketing everything.
And when you hear about the book that you're working on right now.
The book that I'm working on right now, so the one that I'm writing right now, or the one that's coming out?
No, the one that you're writing.
The one that I'm writing right, well, I'm gonna tell you about the one coming out September 1st. I don't care what you ask me, I'm gonna do what I want. I just said, do what works for you, Corinne. I'm gonna do what works for me. So the one coming out in September is actually a novella collection, which is super fun. And it's Christmas, and it's with Deb Rainey. Amanda Wen and I, and it's 3 different time periods in the same little town in Michigan. Did I strong arm my co-authors into doing it in Michigan? Yes, yes, I did. And the reason is, little factoid for you.
Because you're their editor, you can make them.
Kind of, but it's because I'm the editor and I can make them. Kind of. No, I was like, can I please, because here's the story I want to use. And they were like, yes, that's amazing. So did you know that during World War II, the Japanese bombed the continental United States hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times? They did. They sent up these balloons, 33 foot across, made out of mulberry paper. They sent them up into what we now know as the jet stream. They went across the Pacific Ocean, and they started dropping across the United States. There was incendiary bombs attached, as well as anti-personnel bombs attached to them. They landed. They were supposed to start fires. They didn't. Most of them landed on the West Coast, Hawaii, that kind of thing. They came as far as Farmington, Michigan, y'all. One landed in Farmington, Michigan, and where's the other one? Dorr, Michigan. Dorr, little tiny Dorr, Michigan, which is about 10 minutes from my house in southern Grand Rapids. And the balloon survived, and guess where the balloon lives right now?
In your house.
Yeah. It's in my house. If it was, I would be like, oh my gosh. No, it is in the Byron Center Historical Museum, which is about a mile from my house. And so I wanted to use that story in my novella. And so that is the little historical nugget in the 1940s portion of the little town that will be coming in September. And Chris Janyre already told me that she wants to have us here, and Deb Rainey is absolutely driving her car here to join us. So we're working on that, and we'd be happy to have everybody back for that. The one I'm working on right now has a horrible working title. It's called The Shoe Tree. No, it's not the little thing that you put your shoes on. There's this creepy tree in northern Michigan that has shoes hanging from it. And there's all sorts of stories about where the shoe tree came from. And one of them is that it's a mass murderer that hung all of his victims' shoes on the trees. And I'm like, that's a fantastic story for a book. Because, I write suspense. It's lyrical, but it's still suspense. And so I set it during the 1960s when the deinstitutionalization of the mental institutions was happening. And it is a set of sisters. So it is the story of the 2 sisters. And Janine is grinning because she has heard me brainstorm in this one for the last month going, I am tearing my hair out, because it is super, super, super twisty, and getting all those twists right. Whew, hard work, but it's super fun. I finally got it figured out just this last week. So that was totally fun. I have no idea. I don't have a contract for that one yet. So we will see what happens with that. It's been fun to write. Anything else? I think Becky's getting up. Oh, one more question. We have time for one more, Becky.
Okay, last question coming in.
It seems to me, just listening to you, that you're both quirky, funny, and very, very deeply intense. So my question is, what do you do to relax? What do you do for fun? What do you do to just unwind?
Oh my word. I read a lot. Somebody once asked me, how many hours a day do you read? Like, because it's my job too. And I'm like, are my eyes open? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, then I'm reading. So I read a lot. I'm actually an introvert, which blows people away. I love people. I love their stories. And I love hanging out with you guys, and I will go home and crash for the next 3 days. Because I get tired. But I draw and I paint. So I showed you guys the paintings earlier, but my daughter is an amazing fine artist. And if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see some of her art. And she actually does cakes too. Like she blows me away. So if you're local and you want a cake beautifully designed, let me know. We'll add for my daughter. And I love to walk outside. I have a woods behind me, and there's a creek that runs back in there. And take my dog out there and he drives back poison ivy to give to my husband. Very allergic to poison ivy. So I'm always like, don't talk to me, he's not having the words. But yeah, I love hanging out with my kids. My kids are teenagers, but we love hanging out. And I know that's super weird. And I will take it until they don't want to hang out with me anymore, and that's okay. But yeah. I have a good one. Wouldn't change it. I don't sleep. I sleep. I love my sleep. I'm very efficient. So I don't, when I do my stuff, I don't mess around. Like my work sprints, in 15 minutes time, I can write 250, 300 words. So I do not mess around.
When you're at the track, you can listen to an audiobook.
I do. I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I do. I love audiobooks. I just finished Crying in H Part. Very good one. All right.